I'm in Sunbury, Victoria. I was born in Women's Hospital in Carlton in 1962. My parents had separated, got back together. I was a one-night, oops. I think it was just unbearable. Every time my mother looked at me, I just reminded her husband. And unfortunately, she punished me because of it. So she kept giving me away all the time. No real, it's not like she couldn't afford me or any deep, dark, sad story. It was as simple as she didn't like me, or she resented the sight of me, would be a better way of putting it. I am not an official care leaver, though I have never lived at home. I was voluntary placed, though there's no paperwork. I was sort of just handed from one family to another and until they each got bored of me. And so there is no official label for me. And they don't even know whether I was voluntary placed. I was just there because I have inquired. When my mother was pregnant, she tried to have an abortion. So I think we got the hint she didn't want me. Once she had me in the hospital, she rejected me and they didn't know what to do with me. So they sort of, being the 60s, they sort of browed better into taking me home. 2 weeks old, she gave me away for the first time. And it was on and back and forth from 2 weeks old. So virtually from birth. Only till I was, I think, 3. And then it was permanent. She never refused to take me back after that. Until I think 15, I was just palmed off to different families. I never had any stability.
Okay.
So all in all, I mean, I was as bad as foster kid as you could get. But technically, because voluntary placed children are not classified as care leavers, I don't fit in anywhere, despite the fact that I had a very horrific childhood. We have no rights, and it's wrong on so many levels. I ran away at 13 because I couldn't take it anymore. The abuse was just so bad. And the police returned me back to the same people that were abusing me after I told them what was going on. I lasted, I think, another year, 2 years, and then I ran away again, never went back. That was it. So 15. I ended up living on the streets. I just ended up living down St Kilda on the street. Had about as hard a life as you could possibly have. So came back to live with one of my aunties for a while, got a job, that didn't work. It was just a disaster. It was just, anyone that's lived in foster care or that sort of system knows that people have a way of letting you know you're not wanted or you don't belong. But yeah, I was a street kid and I used to help with the suicide squad. The God Squad used to sort of go and talk people out of suicide. Yeah, so what happened was I was sort of living in the Gatwick. If anyone knows the old Gaddy Hotel in St Kilda. Despite what everyone thinks, it was wonderful. It was really, really just, it was like a family that I'd never had. It was an eye-opener, especially when you come from my background, but these people really cared for you. But unfortunately, I saw a lot of death. Every day you'd find someone dead. And I used to sit there sometimes and they'd sit there with syringes hanging out of their eyeballs, out of their, anywhere they could find a vein. And I just talk to them, and I've always had a way of talking to people. And next thing, I'd sort of slowly pull the syringe out of their arm and I'm going, surely I could just sit here and bore you to death. Wouldn't it be easier? I'd just make a joke of it. And next thing, so somebody approached me one day about, why don't you do it all the time? And I went, because it's not something you can force. It just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But I found out very, very young in age I had a very good way of advocating with people. So I've always been an advocate since. It's not a story you sort of share around, though, because people look at you horrified. Because not all of them live. Some of them were too far gone. So I used to just sit there and just watch them fade away. When they get to that point, there's no turning back. So just make it easy for them. It had nothing to do with care leavers, but most of them people were. They were all broken people that had been rejected. Most of them, believe it or not, no, stupid thing, were trans, and being in the 80s. If it's hard now, imagine what it was like then. And I don't know why, I always had a soft spot, whether it was because they had this nurturing thing, I don't know, but the caddy was full of trans, and unfortunately, there was a lot of them that OD'd. Even now, I've got a lot of trans friends. So the society, the system's got a lot to answer for, because most of the people that were on the streets didn't need to be, absolutely did not need to be. But they were just pigeonholed and forgotten about, like me. I came from, despite the fact that they were very horrible people, they were very strict. They didn't swear, they didn't drink. I'd never used public transport. Suddenly I'm on the streets, and you could imagine it was like a whole foreign life. I'm like, it took a while for me to actually get my head around it, but then I really embraced it. I actually loved it. I loved the freedom. I didn't even think about danger. It was just like, oh my God, I'm not being bashed. I'm not being molested. It's so nice. Yeah. It's liberating. It was between the same families back and forwards, but I'll give you an indication. I went to it because I used to have a school dictionary, and I used to write my new schools in it, as everyone did and at one stage I had 13 schools in 1 year. I worked it out because I went through socket. I'd moved 21 times by the time I was 15. You'd literally go to bed and wake up the next day in a different house. So they're obviously a bit shonky. I mean, you don't do that. That's not normal behaviour. So they're obviously doing moonlight flits. And funny enough, do you know what? I've often said this. I do not remember moving one house. I just remember being in the houses. Do you know how you can usually remember packing boxes or furniture being moved? I don't remember any of that. I just remember the houses. They've all become like a blur. You know, like I had two lots. I had a dad, a daddy, a mum and a mummy. I had an aunt and an uncle, but they were all the same people. Try working your head around that one. So at one stage I thought my family that I was living with were my parents, because I called them daddy and mummy, but only to find out that my dad and my mum were my actual parents. And I was thinking, all right. But I found that out the hard way. And then I got shunted to another auntie who quickly told me to stop being so ridiculous, because they're not my parents. It probably sounds easy to say you went to a dozen different houses, but it's even worse when you go to the same families, because you form a bond, especially if they've got kids. And that is absolutely soul destroying, because you get to the point you just shut down and you just don't let anyone get close anymore. And that's how it became, because they were such close family members, like their first cousins, known since I was born. But then you'd form this like you were sisters, and then all of a sudden you'd just be reefed away again. So you'd have that mourning. It was like you were grieving for them. It would have been easier to be sent to strangers, to be perfectly honest. They made it very, very clear, and in the written word, or spoken word, that I was only there under sufferance. Do not speak to them unless spoken to. I had to have my own cutlery, my own towel, because I was a disease. My name wasn't Tracie, it was Germ. So I knew from as young as I could remember where my place was. So you were just there. It's all you know, so you don't question it. It's just part of the way you are. It's just the norm. It never occurred to me the others were having birthday parties and I wasn't included, and they were very physically abusive too. So no, I don't have any nice memories. One aunt didn't physically abuse me. She just tolerated me. She was just there. I can't say that she was horrible to me. She was just distant. She had her children, so she made sure that her son was sexually abusing me and she wouldn't listen to me. The other family they would literally torture me. They despised me, and I never knew why until I was in a rehab and I found out why. It's because I was my uncle's biological niece. I didn't know that they were his stepkids. Okay. It took me until I was in my 20s to find that out, and I looked like him. He was small, he had black hair, brown eyes, they were all redheads, and I looked like I was his. And everyone used to always say, "Oh, is this your daughter?" And oh my God, the hatred they had towards me. And I always kept, when people have asked me what was my life like, I said it's a combination of Flowers in the Attic and Civil. It's funny because I actually really identified, not saying that I've got all these split personalities, but I identified with the angst and all the trauma, and with the Flowers in the Attic, I actually identified with just their whole lifestyle. And it was like it was written for me. So I've never known such evil in a human being, in two human beings. I've seen people be nasty. I've seen people have violent streaks, but these people actually pre-planned what they were going to do the next day. It was horrific because they used to leave me, and it just broke my heart the first time they did it. I think to this day, I'm 60, I can still feel the emotion. And I chased the car up the street because I'm going, you forgot me, you forgot me. But when they came back, I thought they'd come back for me, and I packed my bag and I was waiting for them, and I jumped on my uncle's lap. I was only about 7. My auntie said, I know what you're doing. You're pushing yourself into him. We're all aware of what you're doing. And everything had a sexual connotation with her. It didn't matter what she'd done. So I was never allowed to touch my uncle again, never allowed to show any affection. That was it. So can't even describe how sick they were. I was told from very, very young, and I can tell you exactly the first time was I used to wet the bed. And my auntie would tell my uncle lies. And I'm talking 3 years old. First time I went to school, I wet my pants and I took them off. Well, they didn't have any, they used to give you a change of underwear in those days, but they didn't this one particular day. And the boys took me in the toilet, and a teacher saw them trying to touch me. Well, they told my auntie that they harassed me. Now, I was 5 years old. She went home and told my uncle that I was being rude to the boys. And she stood there while he strapped my legs until they blistered. So I couldn't go to school for 2 days, but I wet the bed. And when I finally went to school, I'd had the same wet tights on. And of course, they glued to the blisters. And the teacher came in and she thought I was just having trouble because I was always so slow. And she got the tights and just reefed them down. And all the lumps of skin come off with it. Well, I'm suspecting it was from then that she made a formal report. And I went home and I got yet another belting for telling them what happened. But I never told them. So teachers knew what was going on right up until high school. They tried to do something, but the principals were scared of my auntie. And in those days, you don't get involved in family problems. Just leave it alone. And my auntie told me when she'd gone too far once and the school was going to get involved, she said to me, if I find out I get charged, I'll kill you, and I'll make sure that if I go to jail, you won't be here with my family. So believe me, I knew not to say anything. It was also an unwritten law. You just knew not to say anything. But in some cases, when she knew she'd gone too far, they'd tell you things. I mean, I was full of bruises. One year I was in high school and I used to run into the cubicle because I didn't want to get changed in front of the others. It wasn't that I was shy. It was just I was black and blue. And she finally stormed in one day and she was about to scream at me, and she saw my whole torso, because they were smart. They'd only hit me torso, and it was black. And she went screaming to the principal and she wanted them charged. So she was brought up to the school, but again, nothing happened. And I used to think, what does it take? Do they have to kill me to actually get involved? But again, that was the time. You don't get involved in family matters. They very nearly did kill me. And even the doctor wanted to have him reported. He wanted to call the police. He had a hot fight with the hospital. But again, we don't get involved. I've had many animals and I've never, ever seen an animal treated as badly as what I was treated. I appreciate people have moods and people have stress. But what they did to me was incomprehensible. You can't even find the words for the cruelty. So I can't say that I'm the worst person. I could make Hitler have a reason for why he done what he done. I don't know why, I always believe there's a reason people do what they do. In their case, there was no reason. So my time in care was, well, it affected my whole life. It did. It traumatised me, and I'll probably go to my grave traumatised. But I don't dwell on it. But sometimes, triggers, you can't help them. But I hold them personally responsible for destroying my life. If they didn't want me, they should have just got rid of me. It was that simple. It was that simple. But In those days, they didn't want anyone knowing that weren't going to take care of someone. It was about keeping face. And plus, there was good money in it. My father used to send them, because he was in the Merchant Navy, he used to send them over lots and lots of money, because he only got paid every 6 months. Yeah, they were on a very good wicket with me. Not that I saw a cent of it, nothing. But they were on a good wicket. And as soon as he'd get slow sending the money, all of a sudden they didn't want me. Because they used to do wire transfers in those days. And because he was overseas, a lot of the times it'd be big months in advance, like that it'd get stuck. I mean, I don't know how much I used to cost, because apparently they'd kick me out, send me to another family, and then the cycle will repeat itself. Now, mind you, when I say my father would send, he'd send thousands, because he was in the Merchant Navy. He wasn't married. He used to get a lot of money. And of course, you could imagine your money's accumulating for all those months. So he'd send over a couple of thousand each time. He wanted to make sure I was really well taken care of. Here I am, a small kid going to a public school. It's not like I was being sent to, Scotch College or anything. I was going to a pub school. The books in those days used to come with the bloody school. So I don't really know what they were spending the money on, because it wasn't me. Terribly, even, I never got birthday presents, never got Christmas presents. I always saw my father, but usually only once a year, because when he was gone for months and months at a time. First, I didn't even know who he was. He was just some bloke that used to come to visit. It wasn't for a long, long time that I found out it was my father. I just used to think he was, I don't actually know who I thought he was. It was just someone that used to visit. And as I got older, obviously I found out he was my father, but he came to live with with my auntie, and had a caravan down the back. He knew how they were treating me. He saw it. He could hear it. He didn't see the physical hitting, but he knew something was going on, but he'd done nothing to lift a finger, because it created his lifestyle when he came back. And I always resented him, and I always will for that. And then one day I got up and he was gone. He couldn't stand it anymore, so he left and left me in it. So, and again, that was my fault, because now they weren't getting money twice off him for rent. So that backfired on me again. So, yeah, when he got cancer, when he was a couple of years before he died, his nurse asked me if I'd take care of him, and I said no, he wasn't there for me, so sorry. I don't mean him any ill will, but I'll organise for him to have a nurse. I said, but no. And I said it to his face. I said, where were you when I needed someone? I needed you as a kid. I said, and you just walked away and left me knowing. And so I wanted to make sure, if anything else, he knew why. He didn't even argue. He knew. He would have expected me to be the doting daughter. Mind you, I still only saw this bloke once every few months. Even though he was there, he was just someone. Biologically he was my father, but that's all. He always cared about me, but never gave me the time of day. We still kept in touch. There was never any ill feeling, but I just made sure I let him know point blank, and I was ostracised at his funeral because of it. I stood on one side of the grave and I stood on the other, and no one spoke to me. They stole his money because they made him, and my aunt was his executor. They took all the money out of the bank, and he left a plot. It was a double plot, and I was supposed to go in there, and I said as a joke, I can't even live with you. Certainly not going to live with you. And next thing, the paperwork came and it had my uncle's name. He put himself down. I thought, because I ran away so young, I just wiped the family. I didn't want to know whoever I knew. Every single one of those family members, including my aunt, my father's sisters, all used to visit. They all heard how I was spoken to. They saw how I was treated. One auntie, actually, who was the meek and mild one, couldn't take it any longer, and she's in my book. She confronted my auntie about why are you so cruel to her? What is she doing that is so wrong? And I wouldn't be doing anything. And she goes, if you want to take her. Next thing, because I was sitting there, my auntie jumps up, goes into the bedroom and comes out with a bag packed, threw it at my auntie, said, you have her, I don't want her. We never wanted her. My auntie's going, but I can't take her. And she's going, well, we don't want her. And I'm just sitting there, okay, And next thing she left, the bag was left on the floor, and I thought I was going my auntie. I was so happy. And she left, and the bag was sitting there, and when she came in, she started smashing me in the head with the bag because she didn't take it. When you're a child, you look to adults for guidance. You think at least if they don't want you, they'll do the right thing, and they'll do something. considering how many people knew how badly I was being treated, I thought at least one of them would report or do something, make an anonymous report, but nobody done a thing. They just all, don't get involved. The ones I did speak to, I spoke to 2 aunties, told them my cousin was raping me. I didn't use the words rape at that time because I didn't know what it was. I just said he was hurting me. I got slapped across the face and told not to say it again. And I was 7 years old. It didn't matter who I spoke to, or I learned pretty much you don't speak to anyone. There is no one there. And I'm not feeling sorry for myself. It's just facts. You know, like you've got 2 grown women standing in front of you. One of them is the mother of the person that's raping you. The other one is the auntie who he raped her 2 children. You would think out of that she would have said, right, enough, it's gone too far. Instead, I get slapped across the face and told never to mention it to a person again. And I didn't. I used to just accept this as how it is. And I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I did try to speak to adults and I got shut down. So really you didn't have any option. If you wanted to live there, you shut up. I found my brother, because I've got 6, I had quite a lot of siblings, and that was the hardest because I was the only one given away. I found a couple of my siblings on Facebook, reached out to, this was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. One told me, I don't know who you are, and I don't want to know who you are. I said, yes, you do. I said, I came up to Queensland to meet you. She goes, well, I know who you are, but I don't want anything to do with you. My brother, Paul, who, I don't know why, but I always pined for him, but I never knew why. Little did I know we were very, very close. And he's older than me, and he told a few stories and how he used to cry all the time because they just took me away from him. And it's funny because you don't see yourself as ever having somebody knowing you. It was quite interesting to hear that because I've got half a finger here. My auntie told me it got caught in a pram. My mother cut it off. Truth was, it was my brother. He jammed it in a door. See the stupid lies she used to tell. And, you know, and then he said he cut all my curls off. And it was just funny hearing someone talking about me without hatred. He's the only one that has kept in touch. And even then he came down, we met once, and that was nice, but I think it's just too long. It was 3 before me, right? And they all lived with a parent. And then she had me. And then immediately she had 2 others to another guy she ended up marrying. But they all stayed with her except me. And that's simply because I was my father's last child. But, I mean, when we saw each other, it was like a scene out of a movie. He was devastated. He was like at the airport. He just couldn't stop hugging me. And he goes, I didn't think I'd ever see this happen again, you know, to this day. But again, he was getting onto a flight. So it was only I saw him for 10 minutes. But my other sister, I got a phone call to say that she died. And I thought, Christ, they're all going to pop their clogs before I even meet them. But I think it's just too long. Everyone's just gone their own way now. And they had ample opportunity to catch me up when I was young. I mean, we only lived within 10 minutes of each other. There is no excuse. My sister when I was 16, visited me. When I was 10, she came. I was so excited because I didn't even know I had a sister. We formed a bond and then I never saw her again. She'd just done a vanishing act. She showed up again when I was 16, yet again. She showed up every day. We went out. She'd done a vanishing act. Never saw her again. We got on so well. And I stood at the gate. We were going to go out the next day and I'd seen her every day. We'd gone out every day and I just waited and waited and waited and I never heard from her since. And I used to think, why are you so, you know, that's the thing about kids. They're so easily disposed of. It's like you just discard them like a tampon. It's horrible. It's like you just don't fit anywhere. There's no real connection with anyone. It's like they can just pick you up, play with you for a while and then throw you back in the toy box. Yeah. And that's probably sounds a bit over dramatic. I mean, I don't know how you can come into someone's life twice, bond with them, knowing what their life's been like, build up that relationship, promise them that they're not going to walk out like they did the first time and then just not show up again. Can you imagine what that does to your soul? it gets you to the stage that you just don't want to trust anymore. You just don't even bother. And that was it. From that day on, I thought, if she ever does ring again, I'm not setting myself up. But she never did. So that was it. I didn't bother reaching out. Not until 1997, I went up to visit my mother for the first time. That definitely wasn't a Walton's moment. I knocked on the door. She raised her hand like this. She goes, before you come in, don't talk about the past. Definitely wasn't one of those running to the arms, slow motion moments. So, yeah, I could talk about the weather. I could talk about anything. Yeah, so she was a cold fish. She didn't really want me there. She just done it because I think she got sick of me ringing. But I got on so well with my siblings, but I never saw him again. The one that said, I don't know who you are, I got on better with her, and she was a stepsister. It was like we'd known each other our whole life. We just clicked, and then all of a sudden they just didn't want to know me again. I think a lot of it, they just wanted me up there out of curiosity. It's like nobody thinks they owe us anything. It's like they think, well, no, you ought to be grateful you're just living here. So it's like you've got to constantly thank them for everything. Thank you for letting me breathe. Thank you for taking me in. I mean, I was called an ungrateful heathen my whole life. I don't know what I was supposed to do. Was I supposed to thank them every morning when I woke up? The other kids would be acting up. They'd be giving cheek, screaming. I'd just get up in the morning and go and sit down, and yet somehow or other I was always wrong. And you think, what am I doing that is so irritating? Even as a child, you become very old in your head. I found very, very young in life that I used to analyse every situation, because you were constantly, what have I done? What did I do? And you'd be thinking now, well, think back, what did I do wrong? And you think back, you retrack yourself, and no, I didn't actually do anything. But that's how, and as you get older, you get better and better at analysing, and you become super cautious. Oh my God, you become so paranoid to make sure that you don't do the wrong thing. I'm not the only one, that's why. I speak to a million people like me. I want to cite Forgotten Australians, and the stories are shocking, absolutely shocking. So when everyone's saying the same thing, something's very, very wrong in the system, that it's allowed to keep going on when it's brought to their attention and they still don't do anything. I've been doing voluntary work my whole adult life. Without even knowing I was doing it, I've been doing it. In 2020, I got the Hume Citizen of the Year award for all my advocacy. But my shining moment was yesterday. I have been pushing and pushing. I live in Sunbury, which is still country. So I've been banging on at them to have an Ida Hobbit Day and have a flag raising. And it happened yesterday. I was so proud. I stood up and done the speech, and Rodney Croom wrote something for me to read out. The fact that I could get someone like that calibre from Tasman to write it. And I was trying to think of who could I speak to about oppression. Who is, I know I could speak, but I thought, so I approached Rodney and I said, look, we're going to have a flag raise. And we've been we're only 5 years younger than Melbourne here. So this is a 190-year-old town, very redneck. 120 people showed up yesterday during lunchtime, considering it was bitterly, bitterly cold. And what was beautiful was there were some trans people in their 80s, have obviously lived in Sunbury their whole lives and come dressed as themselves. The speeches, we had Todd Fernando, who's the LGB commissioner. He came, and it was like, it was huge. Probably doesn't sound much but for a place like Sunbury to have a rainbow flag, and I told them they had the wrong flag. I said, I want the flag that's got the trans triangle in it, because they had the old just normal one. So they had to quickly go and find one of them. And my daughter today said something that was wonderful. She said her friend Riley, he's trans. He broke down and cried. And he goes, oh my God, someone has finally recognised us. And he goes, do you know how many flags I go past? He goes, and to actually see the triangle. And it choked me. So yesterday was a wonderful day, but I've done so many things. But for Sunbury, for all the LGB in Hume, because Hume is very Muslim, very multicultural. So it is like, oh God. They lit up the town hall, rainbow colours, and they really, really made a statement. And the mayor and the CEO and all these people, I didn't even know they knew me, and they stood there, and instead of talking about that, they talked about me. about what I've done in the... So I've been doing this a long time, but I think, Adam, that yesterday was my shining moment. You know, I've done so much for people, but I think yesterday, just seeing everyone's faces and seeing those old people wearing skirts, some of them look like they were just rejects from the 60s, but that's probably the clothes they've had since. And it was just wonderful to see they could actually come out and embrace who they were. And I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And I was about to do my speech and I couldn't speak. I just said, oh my God, I'm so happy. I'm just bursting with pride. Pardon the pun, but yeah, so it was really good. I think that was my shining moment. If I die tomorrow, I think that's the best thing I've ever done in my life, apart from my 3 kids, but that was my shining moment. The week prior, one of those, you know, the Facebook's got those stupid local pages. Well, we got one, and all somebody done was advertise the event that was coming up, and of course all the ugliness come out, and the admin let it run. Usually admins will shut it down or remove the... She just let it run like a bushfire. It got shocking. So I just very, very subtly said to those people that have got an issue with the flag raising, it's a very simple solution. Don't come. I think had it been a weekend, it would have been packed to capacity, but being a weekday, most people were working. And I think to have the people we had, I think that was wonderful. And it's a big thing for Sunbury. A lot of people were probably still sitting home. I want to go, but I don't want people to see me. It's very traditional. As much as we're progressing as a very modern town, it's still very old-fashioned. Only one councillor come and the mayor. The rest didn't come. Just what I do is I do collages, and I've got one already ready, and it's got the 2 that showed up, and I'm just going to put question marks. I don't think they fully understand the magnitude of how big it was to actually say, well, we've got LGBT in this place and we're actually acknowledging them. It was huge. It's broken the ice for a lot of people. We've got a waterfall. So I said to the council, make sure you get the rainbow coloured waterfall going as well. And they did. I run 3 different support groups. One is Speak Up, All Survivors Matter. And that is predominantly for anyone that has had sexual abuse. But believe it or not, my support group, the number 1 problem is narcissistic partners. The top 10, that is the one. It was so hard to get a support group, physical location, that these people felt comfortable. It had to have double doors. It had to have a car park that nobody could see, because they used to follow them, their partners. I found it better if I just done it online, done a live thing. That way they can be anonymous if they want to, and it's wonderful. I also do a lot of men's groups because I don't believe violence has a gender. I know just as many nasty, vicious women, I grew up with them, than I know men. Men will explode. Women are vindictive. And I don't get on with a lot of people, especially feminists, because they don't like my philosophy. As far as I'm concerned, all people are assholes. It just takes something to trigger them. Help run a men's sexual group where they've been raped. They get sent to the women's hospital, and all around you, all they've got is violent men, women being raped by men, and these poor guys are sitting there being told that they're the perpetrator and they've been raped. So it's just terrible. I try to balance it out. I've known some violent men, but I've known more violent women. And it's the subtleness, the coming home by a certain time, and if they're not, they go through their phones and they're screeching at them in their face, going through their wallets. They don't realise what they're doing. It's invasive. If God was to do that, oh God, hell would break loose. I just try to keep my pages very genderless. If I see a good post, and if for some reason women only seem to have mental health issues, every post, 90% of posts, so I'll crop it. So it's just got the message, but not the sex. I run the LGBTQIA plus matter. At the moment, I need a hip replacement, so I'm physically not able to do anything yesterday. I don't believe in therapists. I don't believe in psychologists, because usually they're in their 20s and the only crisis they've had is running out of shampoo. I've got these people that sit there and have never experienced life. They've gone straight from their nice little home to uni, read some books, regurgitated what they've read, got a good grade, and now they're a psychologist, but they've got no lived experience. Here they are sitting there telling me that's absolutely been pushed from pillar to post, kicked around like a bloody stray dog, how I should be acting. And I've got this wonderful way of reversing a situation. So I had one psychologist who for an hour and a half I talked about her bike trip around Prague and she didn't even realise. But when you've got someone that's had the trauma that I've had, really it's like smashing a bowl against a wall. Really, you can't repair it. The only person that can repair it is helping others repairs my life. It really does. And it's not a need to be wanted. It's not a need to be needed. I just physically feel better, resonate, understand, and I empathise with what's going on. I've been there, I've done it. And I think that's why it is so successful, because I don't preach. I don't try to tell people you must do this or you've got a certain way you should heal. You heal when you're ready to heal. The thing is, you don't want to come across as a preacher either, that they think they have all the answers. Then it becomes a trauma Olympics, because I don't walk around with a label. I'm just me. If somebody says, oh, look, I'm really struggling, I've got PTSD or a trigger, and I'll just send them a subtle post or a networking thing. And I don't say, oh, yeah, that happened to me. Oh, my God, which a lot of them do. It always seems to come back onto them. And it deflects away from that person. It invalidates them. It was on SBS, Late Bloomers. That was interesting for the feed. There was about lesbians coming out, and there was in the Women's Weekly for the same sort of thing. You've got to practice what you preach. I was in the paper, in the local paper. I got married to a woman, and the support I got was fantastic. I mean, perfect strangers were coming up to me and congratulating me. Yet other people have said to me that they've had to leave Sunbury because they're harassed. If you're going to be an advocate, then you've got to be prepared to take it all the way. Like, I can't advocate for LGB and then be hiding in the closet. The one thing I say to people, and the number one thing, is come out when you're ready, not when your friends tell you you have to. I have been lobbying the government for the last few years trying to get voluntary placement survivors formally recognised as care leavers, because we don't have any rights. We cannot access redress. We're not considered forgotten Australians. I approached two of the largest law firms in Victoria, in Melbourne, who specialise in that, who said I had a powerful case until they found out I didn't have any paperwork and I wasn't a ward of the state. As soon as they found out I wasn't a ward of the state, they dropped me. I said, but you just finished telling, because I wanted to sue the government for dereliction of duty, because you cannot put a child into care and then forget about it. It was as simple as that, and nobody followed me through. They just allowed me to get shunted through the system until literally there was no paper trail left for me. I applied to the Freedom of Information, who said I don't exist. Even though they've got a birth certificate, a couple of hospital records, I don't exist. I want to see voluntary place survivors get the same respect that others have got. Open House won't touch us because we don't cover their funding criteria. They sent me a welcome pack. I filled it in. I actually felt excited, which sounds pretty pathetic, being excited to be called a forgotten Australian. But when you've never fitted in anywhere, I felt like, oh my God, I'm actually going to belong somewhere. A year went by. I hadn't heard from them. I emailed them, and they said, oh, sorry, you don't fit our criteria. The funding, blah, 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 blah. So they were never going to contact me. So that was it. So first of all, you find out that you're not a ward of the state, you've got no paperwork, you don't qualify for open place, and then apology come for the institutional child abuse. You weren't allowed to go to that because you weren't. And I thought, my God, I've probably been abused more physically, mentally and sexually than 90% of them people. I ended up getting a place to go. But it's like, we absolutely do not matter. It doesn't matter what happened to us. It doesn't matter what the law is. And I actually sent quite a few politicians the Victorian government's law on what a care leaver is. I covered every area. There was not one area that I didn't cover. And I said, I'd like you to explain now why I'm not a care leaver. They couldn't. They said, I'm going to tell you now, Tracie, you're right. You are absolutely right. You do qualify. Every year somebody's going to do something about it, and every year it gets pushed under the carpet. A lot of the problem with the care leavers too, like, you've got too many organisations that have taken ownership of care leavers, and I don't like that. It's like, now you're answerable to these organisations for your mere existence, one particular large organisation. It's like you can't get past that one. And I don't like that. And see, I wouldn't join any groups because I don't like that idea. Once I found out that I didn't qualify for funding from Open Place, they lost me. To openly say that irrespective of your feelings or what you've gone through, it's all about money and we don't want you, that spoke volumes to me. And what is that saying about care leavers yet again? What do they see care leavers as? Just ka-ching, ka-ching. That needs to be addressed. I read every day about somebody was supposed to have got dental, was supposed to get psychiatric, was supposed to get this, was supposed to get that, and they're constantly let down. So who is monitoring this? These people are getting all this funding. Who is policing where the money is going other than to administration? They need to be audited and the money needs to be directed to the service providers that it was meant for. It should be run like NDIS. The people get their own providers and they're then allocated the money towards it, not just give it to some organisation who, when you've got that many disgruntled care leavers, then somebody is really shafting the system big time and no one's policing it. Most of these people are supposed to be volunteers with their brand new cars and they're going out to fine dining restaurants and 5-star motels when they're supposed to be on a voluntary basis. They've been allowed to get away with it for far too long. People seem to think care leavers seem to be intellectually challenged. Because you're in an institution or whatever, well, my theory about like with voluntary place, my argument's always been, I don't qualify as a care leaver because I wasn't in an institution. My argument is a family is an institution. There's also a lack of communication. Like the National Redress was the one that told me to go to the solicitors. They actually sent me a form with a list of solicitors to go to because I qualified. So I had sent them the application. I'd had a verbal hour-and-a-half interview with them over the phone. They still sent me the letter to speak to these solicitors. I then went on to speak to the solicitors, forwarded on all my bloody mountains of paperwork, only to be told, no, we can't help you. Get back onto the National Redress. Oh, all right then. Oh, then we'll just cross you off the file. That's it. Don't worry about the fact that we built your hopes up. So there is just a lack of accountability right across the whole thing. It's just shocking. I mean, I've written submissions to the National Redress. I was invited to Parliament. It was on March 24th, 2022, with Fiona Patton and Tanya Maxwell MP. We presented to the final report on the Victoria's criminal justice system and we made 100 recommendations and every one of them was in that book. So I have spent a lot of time on the computer doing these things, and that's like with this submission. I won't get any justice. I'll go to my grave not having justice. I got rejected by Socket. I tried to put the historical charges in. I will never, but I'll make sure the next generation doesn't go through what I went through. The justice system is, I said it's got more cracks than the Grand Canyon. When people say care leaver, it's such a, it's like it's a label that justifies a lot of bad behaviour. Nobody ever says, well, Tracie, how do you feel about a lifetime of being let down by a government, by authorities, by family? What impact does that have on growing up as a small child to a teenager, to an adult, to my age? The ramifications, people don't understand. And I never realised this. My body is breaking down. And I didn't realise it was because of trauma. I did not know trauma actually physically attacked the body. Nobody ever talks about the mental impact it has, the silent impact that people don't know about. It's fine to say, well, yes, we now know the demographics and we know all the statistics, but there's no emotional part to it. When a few weeks ago, but the Writers' Roundtable, I was looking at all those people and they all had that one thing in common. They were all institutionalised and it was like they were a fraternity. Felt like it was an exclusive club that I didn't belong to. And it's like, even when you speak, you could see people lose interest because you weren't institutionalised. And whether they mean it or not, you can actually see it in their face. It's the same as like when the Cardinal Pell thing was going on. Everything was bang, bang, bang about clergy abuse. Mention incest. I was like, anyway, it's raining outside. It's like nobody's interested. It's like institutionalised abuse is more severe than incest, and nobody ever asks, why is it so easily dismissed? Nobody ever asks you that when you're a care leaver. Like, they just assume you're all in institutions. And you say that you're abused by a nun or you're abused by the staff in a home, and it's, oh my God, you poor thing. You say that you're abused by you, and it's, oh, that happens. People need to address that side, why there are care leavers and incest is such a blasé topic. Not once in my 60, have I been asked about my side. It's always been about care leavers, about institutions, about anything to do with care. Nobody ever asked me about the incest side. It's like that didn't exist. That I'd like to see addressed too. I'd like to see more people actually hold them people accountable and recognise it, because so many people are invalidated because they feel like their sexual abuse, it wasn't as bad because it wasn't a priest. Well, yeah, it was worse because it was someone you trusted. When I went in to do my historical charges, now this guy was an habitual abuser. He had already had multiple charges against him. It was my cousin. His own sister put in a charge with me. Yet we couldn't use anything because it was in another state. Even though other people had written statements on my behalf, they still didn't use them. All he had to do was say that he had dementia, and they didn't even challenge it, and it was dropped. And the worst part is every one of those people that are institutionally abused can all go and get justice, whether monetary-wise or just feeling like they are validated, whereas we just get shafted all over again. I mean, when you've got a policeman that tells you we're going to get him, we've got too much evidence on him, and then they just drop your case inexplicably. They open up Pandora's box, they pick and pick at your wound until it bleeds again, and then, okay, we're not doing any more, and you're left with this bleeding wound. Well, what do I do with all this information that I've repressed for 30 years? But as I said, had it been institutional, I'd be sitting here in my own house, that I've just brought. Every day I read about it's not about the money, it's about the insult that we're not even warranted. Oh, I just got me payout. Oh, I just got me payout. I just got me payout. Victims of crime wrote to me and said, we're truly sorry. We do recognise you as a victim of crime, of the most severest form of crime, but we can't give you any monetary because he wasn't convicted. And I do firmly believe that we need more people like me, because I don't work for anyone. I volunteer, so I can say it. I don't have to sit here and worry about what's said because I'm working for him and I don't want to lose my job. Like when I was doing the submission with Fiona Patton, she said, what do you think should help? I said, well, go and get a big broom, sweep it, get rid of all the broken pieces of workers you've got and start all over again. I said, you need an independent review board, not police, because they're not trained enough. In a nutshell, I think Care Leavers is very biased. It's in favour of institutionalised survivors, and as an incest victim, it really is lopsided. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I tried to suicide over the years because of that invalidation. Get over it. What's your problem? Christ, it was years ago. Are you ever going to stop dwelling on it? Even when I went to Socket and tried to have him charged, it was, oh my God, are we ever going to move on? And suddenly all my family got dementia all at the same time. No one could remember a thing. Police asked them to do a state. Oh, I don't remember. I don't know what you're talking about. That betrayal. I think that was worse than everything, because these people all used to come to my home when I was younger, and that was the standing joke. They called him Chester the molester. That's how bad it was. And then when they were asked, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I'll never ask people for anything again. That was the last. I thought they might do the right thing because it was morally right. Even if they didn't want to do it for me, just do it for the next generation. When the Cardinal Pell thing, I used to have these people on my Facebook, these family members, and one of the posts caught my attention. It said, "String the bastard up. Oh, what a dirty, filthy mongrel. Oh, fancy doing that to a kid." And I was like, but your brother done it to me and you knew it. And then I'm reading all the comments. I thought, are you joking? You hypocritical bastards. You've listened to that to me for years. That's what I'm saying. It's like incest is nothing and clergy abuse is so offensive. So when it comes to care leavers, I don't have any good words. Sorry, I have been shunted and shafted.